What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Unemployable. We have a red hot racy show for you today that is going to include some pretty cool content. Are you boys pumped and ready to roll for another episode? How you going, Eric?
He's definitely pumped. After the WhatsApp chats, he's more than pumped.
After the research this week?
Yeah, for boats, that is.
Eric actually hasn't slept. He's just been researching.
Like Quagmire out of Family Guy.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Were you watching me through my window, were you?
I was, indeed. Yeah.
So, guys, today we are covering the business of OnlyFans, which was very eye-opening for us middle-aged gentlemen who, honestly, as far as I know, have never been into OnlyFans. We're going to dive into that today, as well as a whole bunch of other cool stuff. We're going to be diving into the potentially imminent bull run of crypto. What do we all think of that? And a whole bunch of other stuff. Mark, how are you, mate? You up from Melbourne again?
Yeah, good to be here, and very intrigued to see how this one goes. It's some great topics.
JD, what's happening?
Couldn't be better, Adam. It's going to be a fun one. You can see the band has already started, and I don't think it's going to slow down at all from there. So looking forward to it.
For those watching, we have a WhatsApp group between us with our producer and the rest of the crew, and this week has been particularly spicy because of we actually had to open an OnlyFans account because we wanted to go in there and actually do the research properly. So you can imagine the back and forward with it. But I wanted to kick off the show before we get into that with a bit of fun, because whenever, guys, you launch something, and if you're out there listening to this and you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to launch something, something that is absolutely for sure is you're not going to get love all the time. Publishing art takes courage. There's a fantastic book by Seth Godin called The Icarus Deception, and it's really dedicated to artists of all kind, whether you're a musician, whether you're an entrepreneur, anybody expresses themselves creatively and then publishes, which Seth Godin calls the definition of art. You're only an artist when you actually publish, and this podcast has been months and months in the making, hundreds of thousands of dollars to set it all up. And then you publish and you put it out to the world, and your friends and your family and your mum cheer you on, but there's always those who don't. I thought it might be fun just to read the best comment that we got this week, best feedback, which was sent through, and here it is. So, guys, this is a lesson. If you're watching this or listening to this and you ever feel you're getting harsh criticism, try this one on for size. Okay, so here it is. I watched your podcast and it sucks balls. 2 out of 10. You're missing the point. Fox News works because of debate. There's no debate. You need to get creative. The presenters are all the same, in my opinion. And also, none of us have any fucking idea who the hell you clowns are. At least stick to some company. At least stick some company logos and who you are. I don't respect any of you. I know you're all successful, but in what? You need to keep referring to yourselves and what you've done. Like Patrick Bet-David, everyone knows he's in insurance. He says it in every episode. He says he's built a company with 30,000 employees and $400 million. Your show is so shit. Zero relevance, no topic, no direction. What's the agenda? What's the core values? Why should I even listen to you? And the most important is, how is any of this shit even interesting? Talking about Elon's book, you didn't even mention that he has 12 kids, a failed 5th marriage, and all the rest. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. We officially suck balls, according to one person in Australia.
Just want to fact check. Elon has 11 kids, and I think he's had 2 failed marriages. One failed twice, though.
Yes. So take that back and smoke it. But you look at it. That's one person's perspective, and you've got to look at who said it, what they're actually saying, and who this podcast is appealing to. And I can't imagine that person, would even follow you in your carpool coaching, wouldn't get much out of this podcast. But, he's not the ideal avatar. So, if you look at the website, it's pretty clear what Unemployable is about. And it's not about having a slinging match. If you want to, go to some right-wing craziness, go to Foxtel and watch Paul Murray. Like, that's not this show. So, while some of the points might have been, on point there, but, having another political show where you're just ripping on one party to another, I mean, I probably wouldn't be here if that's what the nature of the show is going to be about.
Yeah. Go ahead.
He was so well versed on everything that we spoke about, though, so he actually took the time to watch the entire show. Yeah. And I think that was incredible. So there's still obviously a need for people to discuss these kind of topics. He just wants it in a different way, and that's fair feedback.
And he cares enough to write, it's great. And look, the difference between mainstream media that has been built on the back of Rupert Murdoch and conflict and drama and all of that, if you look at the podcasting world, some of the biggest pods in the world, like, Andrew Huberman. It's just directly down the camera. There is no conflict. It's all just straight, solid education and information. You look at many of the big shows, they're calm. Lex Friedman, just quality content. So it's a different format. But look, guys, we appreciate all feedback. We will listen. Some of it we'll put in the circular filing cabinet, but we will listen. We're interested to hear. And I think it's good. So what did you think of it, Eric? Did you have a laugh?
I actually had a laugh, but at the same time, I think there's some relevance there, with people needing to know a little bit more about us. Obviously, we've done one episode and touched on, each other's past a little bit, but nowhere near enough. So I think there's some relevance in that at the same time. But after reading that, when you sent that to me, I got a bit upset and a bit sad. So.
Eric, you okay there, mate?
No, I just went straight to OnlyFans. Made me feel a lot better.
But if you go through on the first step and the second step in there, and have a look at the flip side, that was one against an army of other positive comments.
Totally.
That actually did it. It's not just about well done, guys. That actually did pull out specific parts of those pods and go, that resonated with me. I want to hear more about that. So it wasn't just as I said, pat in the back, boys. It was actually something of value that people took away and could put practically into their unemployable lifestyle.
So a big thank you for all of those that did drop a comment. And please do drop comments below these YouTube videos if that's where you're watching it. Let us know your thoughts. And, we're seeking to build a community, Mark.
I was going to say, I've been telling everyone how much I want a Cybertruck, a bulletproof Cybertruck, and I think now I know why it needs to be bulletproof.
Yeah, exactly. So let's jump into this first story because, OnlyFans is a really interesting, look, I got to admit, when I thought of OnlyFans, I had, prior to doing this research, the completely wrong idea, actually, of what, not completely wrong, but I was certainly surprised by what I saw. And I'm going to get your take in a minute, but I'll just tee this up a little bit for the audience as to partly why we're doing this, because I think it's culturally relevant at the moment, and it helps us sort of older generation understand the younger generation a little bit more. But there's no doubt the world is changing. This story that came out this week with Iggy Azalea, who is the Australian rapper, she had that one big hit. I'm not going to attempt to sing it, but it was real catchy, something about being a boss or something. She went on to OnlyFans and have reportedly earned $48 million on OnlyFans in her first 12 months on the platform, which is pretty staggering. So we had a look at that article, and we then jumped over and had a look at another article, Greg, that you might bring up quickly, which was on Business Insider. And we were just trying to do a little digging to find out how big is this OnlyFans platform today. And as you can see here, OnlyFans users spent more than $5 billion last year as the number of creators surged 47% in a year, 47% in a single year, which is pretty insane numbers for any business at all. And it's up. What's the number of creators was 3.2 million in 2022, up to 3.2 million in 2022, up from 2.2 in 2021. So a massive, massive increase in this business. So, boys, I'm going to get your feedback. Just a couple more things I want to mention. What we found really interesting is that this now is a legitimate industry. Like, we Googled OnlyFans agencies because this talent, most of the talent that's doing well now actually has representation. They have agencies that are running their OnlyFans for them, all the back end stuff, and there's this whole industry of what we call chatters. And I'll just tell you a little bit about what chatters are. So chatters, for those of you watching, are people that engage in the messages, the direct messages that the girls or the guys have on the platform. And so this is where a lot of the money is made, is in the back and forward, in the chatting. And so there's whole agencies that manage all that chatting and all of that stuff, which is really, really interesting. We're also going to dive into, in this section, the dark side of this as well, which is quite concerning. So, we, of course, wanted to buy local, so we jumped into OnlyFans and subscribed to Iggy Azalea's OnlyFans. We'll show you around there in a minute. But what were your first impressions, guys, when you jumped into OnlyFans for the first time and had a look around? What was your first take on what you saw?
Yeah, look, it was, a relatively simple platform to use and navigate around. Could understand it, was very crisp and clear. And I think that's one of the selling points with any SaaS is how easy is it to use. And from a buyer's perspective, and I'm sure it's not too hard from a content creators perspective either. But as we've all just discussed this morning, one thing they've got blocked in there, which was rather alarming, and there's no search function at all. So you can't go and search for any individual account and have it show up. Like we tried to search Tiger, a few of the larger name accounts, nothing came up, which is a bit perplexing to think, okay. And the reason for that, if you dig a little deeper, about content sensitivity, discretion, etc., and the user choice. So this dovetails into the agency model as well, is because this is all private promotion. In other words, the platform will not spit you up at the top of the algorithm. If you want to get promoted on here, you've got to have a content strategy of your own and bring in the traffic from external sources. So in one way, it's quite smart. As we can't search. If you want to know of a creator, they've got to do that by their own marketing skill sets.
Instagram and everything else they're doing out there.
Those agencies, your Chatter obviously is the lowest common denominator, but the clearest, whoever's got the best marketing model will win. And to that point, we're at the boxing the other night with a friend, I won't mention names, and their son is actually started one of his own agencies. They're pulling 30 to 40 grand a week as 20-year-old kids kids to us, promoting OnlyFans talent. And as we worked out now, I'm just looking at this now, it's not doing their internal chatter, it's not doing their internal some of it's how to talk to camera, but it's how they're driving traffic to that creator's profile, which I found quite interesting. And here's the reasoning why. There's no internal promotion.
But the chatting is a huge part of it, right? Like
sure.
Actually engaging and selling the other things that the girls have. And in a minute, we'll bring it up. For me, one of the things that really struck me was when I signed up for Iggy Azalea's account, I actually had her Instagram open on my phone, and of course OnlyFans open on the computer, and the content that was available for the $25 I think it was a month, was very much the same. Iggy is not, she literally says, in fact, Greg, have you got it open there? If you go, I don't know if we can show this, but it actually says in her chat, when you go to the chat, it basically says that, I don't do full nudes. I don't show particular things. So it's kind of got the rules at the start there, right? There it is there. That, the stuff that you're looking for is in the DMs, but I'm not going to publish anything on here more than just boobs and bums, basically. And if you want more than that, you got to hit me up in the DMs. So really, people are paying, in her case, $25 a month just for the opportunity to get in the DMs. And that's where I imagine the chatters kick in, which are sort of like farms of, like if you go to Fiverr.com, which is a sort of an outsourcing website that does stuff like, YouTube thumbnails. It's like an Upwork, or it's a site for all kinds of little digital jobs. There's a whole section dedicated, as you can see here, to if you want to get OnlyFans Chatters, people to manage your DMs and chat in OnlyFans. So it was quite interesting that they're not really showing anything, a lot of these girls, in that area.
It's wild. Like everyone's heard the OnlyFans joke or the punchline of the joke, and someone uses OnlyFans, and you expect to go on there and just see all this nudity and whatever. But there's ladies doing cooking classes, and there's all kinds of like interesting things that are showing up in the feeds. But yeah, it's like a distribution platform.
Well, that's what got my attention as well. Like when I was reading about Iggy and why she jumped on, I saw an article that she was saying, look, I had a misconception about OnlyFans, and it's a place where I can actually do creative work, and I'm like, really? Like, isn't it just straight porn? But when you go into the main feed, which is full of OnlyFans created content, they have podcasts, they have cooking shows, they have long form content where the OnlyFans stars, like the cooking shows on there, are arguably quite similar to like MasterChef in terms of quality. They're not that far off, except all the stars are OnlyFans creators. And then underneath the show, it's got links to their accounts. And I found this part fascinating because unlike like our generation, if you wanted that kind of content, there was just porn, right? Like you go to a website and it's straight into it, Whereas here, they're actually in many ways humanizing and not objectifying the talent. You're getting to know these girls and guys through content that we're normally seeing on mainstream media. So you're watching a porn star cook pumpkin muffins, and it's interesting because you don't see that side of them normally. And in many ways, I thought, this is actually maybe a lot healthier because they're not objectifying the talent in the way that the generation before. And I can see why, if you've just watched a piece of content that the brain is thinking, this is MasterChef, but now the chick is texting me in the DMs and offering me other things, how compelling that is, especially to somebody lonely. And it's kind of interesting. I'm not quite sure how I feel about that. But what did you feel, Eric, when you looked at that yourself? Did you have any thoughts on that?
Like when I was first searching in OnlyFans, I just couldn't believe, again, the videos of them, cooking and different things. And honestly, I've learned now to make a shit hot gingerbread house. And I just want to thank Mercedes for that, honestly. But to be honest, now I know why a lot of them promote on other channels like Instagram and other social platforms, because you can't actually search them, like James said. And I was driving on the M1, this is a few weeks ago, coming back down to watch the Tim Zoo fight on the Gold Coast. And I seen this bright yellow Dodge Ram. And the first thing I thought of, I'm like, who the hell would drive a bright yellow Dodge Ram? And the license plate was rammed. Then as I drove up closer to the Dodge Ram, on the side of the Dodge Ram said, "Watch me get rammed," and a QR code, OnlyFans. So obviously it's an OnlyFans creator that's driving this thing, and it's a very unique way of promoting, right? Because again, if you know who they are, you can't just go there and search them. You'll have to go through their Instagram, and this is what I show on Instagram, as a lot of them say, because I know a couple of them. A couple of them are, acquaintances, as an example, that are on OnlyFans, and on their Instagram, they have their Instagram, but then they have links going, if you want to see more racy content, click here, and then it takes them to the OnlyFans. And I guess that's one of the ways that they'll...
It's the emotional connection, right? Because it's social media, so you are socializing on Instagram, and you know this person, which brings a completely different... Well, you feel like you know this person. It brings a completely different layer of intimacy to the content.
Funny you talked about the amount of creators and what they call not safe for work. In other words, the tits and ass sort of model is that 70% of the creators are NSFW, as they call it, which leaves 30% who are not. And I believe that number from the stats I was looking at is increasing. So, when OnlyFans came out, and yes, sex sells, they cornered the market with the pornography, if you will, or a lighter version of it. They're now certainly leaning into the non-porn version, or the safe for work environment as well. So that market's growing. So well done to them. Yeah. Because that's 30% is not in the sneeze at. And again, if you have that Instagram, semi-personal touch to it, to them reacting to your stuff, and you can buy DMs and give them tips and whatnot, it's going to become a big playground for the non-porn side of it as well.
It seems like there was a big push to clean it up in 2021. They had pressure from outside investors or bankers to try and clean it up. I don't know the stats behind this, but I would imagine on sites like Pornhub or whatever else that the owners of the site are making all the profit from the people spending time on the website. But just seeing the way OnlyFans works, it was like they could upsell you a photo for $5, or they could upsell you a subscription for $25. So it seems like it's I guess it's rewarding the creator for putting themselves out there, and I guess that's got to be positive in a way as well.
Yeah, that was my experience. We all subscribed to these because when you go into OnlyFans, and Greg will throw some B-roll here, I'm sure, over the top of inside the platform. We have to blur some of it out because particularly the paid content, because you have to pay and we have to respect the artist for that. But when you go to a free subscription, what was really interesting was almost immediately that you subscribe. I don't know if you guys had this experience, you get a DM from the creator. Now, it's very much probably not the creator. Yeah. it's a team that are working in behind an agency, and I believe the agency splits range from 50 to 70% going to the agency.
Oh wow, okay.
But they're running all that all the people that are engaging, I assume probably mostly men, in dialogue and conversation and upselling them into photos and videos and personalized videos and all these things. But the immediate moment that I opted in, you see in the DMs, hey, thanks for subscribing, click here to see a photo, $6, or, you know, you've got some of them up here. What was your experience? Was it the same with the 68 people that you subscribed to, Mark?
I just thought this is pretty wild. Like it just seems like a massive industry is building around this. But you know, I question if it's the best way for young men to be spending their time. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But yeah, it was pretty wild. I had no idea that it was so monetized and so systematic like it was. But I guess that's where those big numbers are coming from.
Yeah, it's a business. I mean, you can't really. I mean, what are your thoughts on it for the girls? Like that, it's pretty hard to put that genie back in the bottle when you can go work at Woolies for $20 an hour, or you can do OnlyFans and make $20 a second.
I bumped into my old landlord and I said, "Oh, how's things going? Have you got a new tenant and whatever?" He's going, "Oh yeah, just got a new girl and she does OnlyFans." I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." She's like, "Yeah, as long as she pays the bills." Like I think it's becoming more socially acceptable as well.
Yeah, not only that, it's the secondary market that's created as well with the chatters, but also with these agencies. I mean, who would have thought you got professional agencies, and as we said, to quote back to our mate's son, he's pulling 30, 40 grand a week as an agency. Working online, they've got 2 staff. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at. That's freight. That's $2 million a year they're pulling out of that thing. They reckon they can maximise it to 100 grand a week.
They have teams of chatters though that they manage. Yeah, so sure. The chatters are trained in, and this is kind of where it gets a little bit grey, and it might be a good moment just to have a look at this, the dark side of this, before we sort of deconstruct. And I'm going to ask you some questions you might want to think about. One of them is going to be, would you date an OnlyFans girl? Or what would you do if you found out your partner was on OnlyFans? We'll come back to your thoughts on that in a minute. At some point in the past, you know, I have my answer because my wife asked me this question. Because during the week I said to the boys, "Here's the OnlyFans login. You know, I would recommend that you let your wives know before you jump in. James doesn't have to worry about that. Remember, girls, if you're single and looking for somebody good, James is available.
And we'll have an OnlyFans channel very shortly. You got
to advertise.
Pay to play. You
got to advertise. That I said to the boys, get clearance on your wife. But my wife did actually ask me that question, like, what if I told you that I used to have an OnlyFans? No, she didn't. But what and I'll tell you the answer to that after we watch this clip, because I want to, it's very easy, I think, to sometimes take it lightly, but like all these things, when you attract a lot of money into a space, you attract all kinds, and of course, the most high profile of all of them when it comes to girls on cams in recent times is none other than Andrew Tate. And this isn't that long ago. I was surprised because I thought this clip, I knew Andrew had a very dark past, and I've watched some of his old clips way back in the day. This isn't that old, and it's pretty hard to watch, and I find it almost impossible to defend him after seeing this. But let's watch this because he talks about, I'll just let him do the talking.
The women who were on stream were beautiful, but they didn't have a fucking clue what to say. They were saying all the wrong shit, man. Every day they were saying the wrong shit, and we were losing customers. Everything I was telling you earlier about wanting to be innocent. They're saying, "Oh, I've been here, I've been there." I'm like, "Shut the fuck up! You're talking to some dude. He doesn't want to hear where you've been. He knows you can't be a 10 talking about how you've been to Dubai to some fucking dude in Minnesota who's fat. He ain't gonna ever believe that he's gonna get you that way. You gotta lie to him. You gotta lie to him." She's like, "Lie and say what? Say that you've never been anywhere because you don't trust men. You can't find a man who's serious. Make him think that if he's serious about you, that nothing else matters. Wow, you gotta put a famoose on it." So I'm trying to teach these women, and the women kept fucking it up. So I said to them, it's like, "You know what, fuck it. I'm taking over." So what I did is I unplugged their keyboards and plugged a new one in from me behind the screen. So the chicks would sit there and hit a keyboard that wasn't plugged in. And me and my brother, and eventually some staff I trained, would do all the talking. The girls were just famoosers, just laughing and doing this. Their titties out, and they were talking to fucking ice cold hustlers. We were taking their money, all of it. If they'd come and say, "What kind of," all of it. We were fucking milking them dry. Women haven't got a clue how to famoosa dude. They don't have, because they rely on their looks. They don't have any of the intellect. They have no game, nothing.
There's some, though. There's
nothing.
There's some.
Nah, you get a man with game and give him a female's body, a female avatar. He will fuck a guy up. I had these guys selling their houses, life savings, loans, all of it to me. Give me it all. So like, and it's basic shit, right? You'd have a guy.
Did you feel bad or no?
Fuck no. To give a solitary fuck.
All right, you can stop it there.
Did you tell like?
So that is horrendous to watch, and as a guy, I feel pretty bad. But it shows both sides of this. You know, that the guys are being fleeced by dudes as well, and pretty bad dudes at that. I mean, yeah, it's hard to watch. What did you think when you guys saw that?
Yeah, well, firstly, Tate, I've watched some of his stuff over the time, and that's the end of it for me. That was a step too far. I didn't quite realise how far they went with fleecing guys. As he said, all of it. So there's that part of it, but yeah.
And his views on the women too.
Totally.
I think is hugely misguided.
Both the misogynistic part, but then the just the seediness of the way they've gone about especially emotionally extorting people.
Vulnerable, lonely people.
Vulnerable, lonely people. Yeah. So yeah. Not a fan.
I've never really been a fan of Andrew Tate. I've always thought that he's probably more toxic to the world than he is good. I think that the reason that someone like Andrew Tate has risen to such prominence is because the opposite end of the spectrum is going so far. Men are becoming a little bit more unsure of their roles in society because of all the things that you hear on the news, and you know things like political correctness, feminism, social justice, modern dating and relationships, body positivity and fitness. Like, he's talking up about all these things, and I think people are getting a little bit lost one way, and so he's rising up on the back of those things, and people are, he's borderline funny sometimes. Like, you listen to him,
he is
take
funny
the piss
sometimes.
out of haters, and you're like, this guy's actually funny, he's witty, he's smart. But yeah, I don't think.
And his new message to the world is, I empower young men, get them to the gym and all that. And you can't not. It's very hard not to agree with his new stuff now that he's super rich, but his past is kind of undeniably there. But I think I think for proper, I think there's OnlyFans creators that are disappointed to see that, because I don't think that's representative of the entire platform in any way as well. So it's just important that we don't sort of. I mean, I thought, it's easy to just get polarized by someone like Andrew and go, that's the whole industry.
I mean, he's obviously selling, through controversy. Yeah, you can see that, but in my view, it's quite disgusting the way he comes across. He looked like an evil character. I took all their money. They're taking out loans.
He looks like Satan,
they're
right?
selling houses. Did you feel bad? No, not at all. Like, that's sociopathic kind of behavior, if you ask me. It's odd, but at the same time, there's very, very lonely people out there that are on the back end of this and thinking that it's really that woman on the other side. Yeah. And I did a little bit of research in a Men's Health magazine article that came out, and they were asking why are people, men specifically, obviously, are using OnlyFans. And they were saying things like, I want the money to go directly to the producer, to the creators, not sleazy porn producers. I found that quite interesting, right? So they're cutting out the middleman.
Do you believe that? They're just like virtue signaling. No, it's all about the girls.
Honestly, OnlyFans takes 20%, right? That's how it works. They keep 80% and 20%. To be honest with you, I don't think that's bad for the creator. I think it's going to be definitely like Booking.com and Airbnb in the future, and I think those commission rates will increase. And I did some calculations on what that increase would be, and just an increase of 5% would add about $150 million to the bottom line, which is big numbers. But then another comment was, if you consume it and can afford it, consider directly paying for it, which I found quite interesting. But my favorite one out of them all was they also mentioned things like the personalization of OnlyFans and the one-to-one interaction, because obviously it makes a lonely person feel good, right, if they're not being spoken to by many people throughout the day. And one guy said, as an example, there are 0 videos on Pornhub of a woman screaming the name Obadiah. So obviously,
They're filling a niche.
They're filling a niche, right? And I just want to say that's interesting, and thank you for your comments, Obadiah.
Eric, what do you think? What do you think about this being such a big growing trend, and young men, boys, spending more time engaging with women or the opposite sex for that matter? There's men on OnlyFans as well and whatnot. What do you think of that as an issue? Do you think it's going to create an issue moving forward as well?
I think it will create an issue, but at the same time, I think to myself, you might as well get it done now, because in the future you're probably going to be speaking to a robot. That's the reality. It's not going to be a chatter anymore. It's not going to be a real person, even though it's probably some guy in Africa or in India that's you're chatting with. But at the same time, that's where we're heading, I think. But what do? Do you go and get your hit on a porn site as an example, if that's what you're looking for, or do you go and try and get a little bit more deep and meaningful connection? Like, I did some research on average time, and average time on the site on OnlyFans was 5 minutes and 15 seconds, which I was very, very surprised about. Obviously James skews that number a little bit, but overall, I thought
down or up.
definitely down. But I thought people would be on there for longer.
I just think if more and more, and there is obviously a problem with loneliness, and since COVID that's probably been compounded and whatnot, but I think if more and more users are starting to use these platforms, then in the real world, I think less and less men would be approaching beautiful women and saying hello. So I just think there's probably a real opportunity to be a purple cow out in person and go up to women and say hello, because they're probably getting less people saying hello to them these days, because everyone's just heading online when they're lonely.
Greg, I'd be interested in your take, because for those who don't know Greg's our producer behind the camera back there, and he's a little younger than us, and in his circle of influence, you're a photographer outside of here, and you do know some of these creators and women. What's their take? Like, how are they feeling? I mean, obviously they have an opinion about Andrew Tate, but what is their view on being an OnlyFans creator?
Yeah, it's pretty wild sitting there listening to Andrew Tate brag about emotionally extorting and manipulating vulnerable men, when that's the exact thing that his fan base and a majority of men who hate OnlyFans and OnlyFans creators, that's what they accuse OnlyFans creators of doing. And they sit there and say that, these women don't have any skills, they don't have to put any effort, they just sit there and take the easy route and just rake in money from vulnerable and desperate men, which is just a complete false narrative. And I think a lot of that is actually driven by people like, first of all, Andrew Tate, but Iggy Azalea and celebrities that have huge names coming onto the platform and making insane amounts of money because they already have millions of followers and things like that. So their fans come over and they're like, oh, wow, I can see her naked, whatever. And they pay $25 a month or what have you, and they sit there and they get barely more than they're getting on Instagram, and they get really jaded and upset about the platform and go, oh, this is ridiculous. I mean, realistically, on this platform, unless you're in the top 3 to 1% or above, you are not making even enough money to live full time, solely off of OnlyFans content creation. So first of all, I mean, a lot of the women that are below the 5%, which is, again, a vast majority, they are doing all the messaging and stuff like that themselves because they don't have the funds to sit there and outsource. And the people that are outsourcing that type of stuff is solely because they literally can't handle by themselves the amount of messages that they get. They're getting thousands of messages a day of people requesting things and stuff like that. So it's just not manageable. They're not sitting here like Andrew Tate being like, oh, I'm going to take this guy for all that he's worth and things like that. That's such a ridiculous and sociopathic view to take. So the fact that he's taking it and his fans are still defending him is so wild to me. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty wild. But like you were saying before, Adam, I think OnlyFans is just generally a better way to consume porn, and it's a more healthy way to do so. I mean, like you said, you get on here and you get to talk to these women, and you get to see what they're like beyond just like going onto Pornhub and watching these free clips and just watching them get railed, and then it's like, oh yeah, they're just viewed as a sexual object. Here you get to see them doing real things. There's girls on there that their whole niche is they don't even do any porn-based stuff. They just sit there naked and like clean houses and things like that. Like there's so many niches on the platform that are just so much more healthy and are such a better way for young men to consume porn and get their rocks off without it just being like, oh, here's a girl, watch her get run on, like a train run on her by like 6 guys and stuff like that. Like it's just a very unrealistic and unhealthy view of sex, I think, if you're a young person, new to that area. And then there's the whole take, like you were saying before, Eric, which Adam made a joke about, is that the real viewpoint of people? But I actually do share that viewpoint, and that's, I think it's so much better to be paying these creators directly. A lot of these women are on here because, maybe they have dabbled in the porn space before, and this is a way for them to take control of their livelihood. And, they are in control of everything. They get to put out the content that they want to put out. They get to say the things that they want to say. And it's just, it's really empowering, I think, for them to take that into their own hands, because historically the porn industry is just super toxic, super sleazy. There's a lot of horror stories that I've heard personally from that space that just, they make your skin crawl. So the fact that these women are allowed to take control of their creation and their content and their sexual space is just, there's not really many downsides for it for me. So it is a deep and complex issue.
It is. It's a lot more complex the more you think about it.
Yeah.
And it became like, I'm going to just circle back before we close this off and ask the question to you guys. What would you do if you found out your wife or long-term partner used to have an OnlyFans before you? How would you feel about it? Because this is a real conversation I had with my wife, and I'll tell you my answer in a minute, but I'd love to hear your feedback. Now everyone's like, oh shit, I don't want to say anything.
I'm single. I'm single. I'm probably going to find my next girlfriend on there. So, I'm open. I couldn't care less.
You couldn't care less. What about you, mate?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not. I think it's all depending on the type of content that was put on there. But yeah, I mean, I haven't thought about it. I don't know. I don't think it'd bother me too much. But yeah, I'm not.
I think I'd be a little bit devastated, depending on what content.
Yeah.
If it was just, bikini shots or something, that would be fine. But if it was, full blown, it would definitely have an impact. I would feel.
Yeah, I think the point there is to what level. If it's, as Greg said before, if it's just a
Home alone, no other partner with them, on their own, doing
and
videos for guys and texting guys and photos for guys.
Yeah, I mean, again, if it's like not too much more than their Instagram, girls got to eat.
I think the reality is, though, it is probably a little bit more than Instagram, right? Like,
it is. When you get into the DMs, I'm talking, what's going on in the DMs. Guys aren't paying for nothing, right? Like, I'll tell you my answer, right? Like, when I lived in Los Angeles, there's a lot of people there doing it tough, right? They're there for Hollywood and they're there to make it. And, I had the privilege of going there with some skills as an entrepreneur and a business that started off pretty well. But I was very, very slow to judge people who were making ends meet in other ways, because it's tough. It's their body. They're in a bedroom on their own. They're safe. They're alone. And I said to my wife, I said, look, hon, like if you were coming up and that was the best option available to you, you had a young son like she did, and you were taking photos or doing that, and it was all in the confines of your own house, and there was nobody else there, I actually would, I don't really have a judgment about it, because I think, it's their life, I don't know, it's different, but I think we should be slow to judge. Everybody's got different backgrounds and stuff. Very
true, and I guess it's better than some of the alternatives, like you said, the safety and comfort of their own home and things like that. And I think, like Greg was just saying, like a lot of these women are approaching it as a business, and they're just trying to make a career out of it and get a start. So, if they've gone into it with that mindset,
And with the bank they can pull down, it's like pretty hard to say, no, you shouldn't do that. It's a tough one.
Exactly. Why shouldn't they be able to?
I see a gap in the market for financial coaches, OnlyFans creators.
Yeah,
honestly, the money that these people are making, right? All they got to do is work a handful of years, invest wisely. They wouldn't have to work again a day again in their lives.
And I'm sure at a certain level they do. A lot of the really big ones would have money managers and agents and stuff anyway. But there you have it, guys. OnlyFans, interesting world that we're living in. It's certainly opened our eyes, and we will be unsubscribing shortly. I think we've still got a month to go on Iggy, so let's just see how that goes. But
I was going to say something, but I'm just going to keep it to myself.
Yeah, as we were joking off camera before, we said, remember, if you say something too risque, you can always edit it out or make a reel. So let's change gears, talk about cryptocurrency. A lot of you guys out there we know are side hustlers, trying to get stuff going. Many of you probably have bought cryptocurrency at some point in the past, and maybe thinking about it again if you watch YouTube, which is chockers with cryptocurrency content. So we're going to dive into this and talk a little bit about, you'd have to be sort of blind, not starting to feel the ground rumbling again in that space. Everybody's talking about 2024 being the start of a significant bull run, certainly in the Bitcoin space and moving on. There's a few things happening. I will disclose I am a Bitcoin owner and a significant Bitcoin owner and believer in it, but within a very specific use case. Mark, you own crypto as well, and not just Bitcoin. You own a few other things.
No, mainly just Bitcoin. I have owned other things in the past and gone down those rabbit holes, but this time mainly just Bitcoin. Have basically come up with a rule to allocate a percentage of net liquid wealth to Bitcoin, and so basically did that about 3 to 6 months ago. So.
Yep, and a lot of young people, crypto represents a way to invest that boomers didn't have coming up. Many boomers don't understand it at all, and they're obviously curious because they can't afford houses and so on. So it's interesting to them. James, do you own any crypto?
Yes, I do.
You do?
Yeah, we'll talk to one of those in a moment.
Yep.
As well.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you own some as well?
I do.
So we all own crypto, okay. But it's all a small part of our overall pictures.
Yeah.
So for those of you, I'll just give you a little bit of colour before we dive into the chat. There's a few things happening with Bitcoin at the start of 2024 that's all sort of converging together. The big one, of course, is the halving. So for those of you who don't know what the Bitcoin halving is an algorithm that is programmatically set. So it's basically programmatic monetary policy as opposed to governmental policy with human beings that can, be swayed or have motives such as getting elected again and human-controlled money presses. With Bitcoin, it's not. It is not centrally controlled. The halving means that the algorithm will change and make it twice as difficult to earn a Bitcoin through solving problems on computers. That's how Bitcoins are printed, if you like. Like money is printed on a press, Bitcoin is printed by computers solving problems. It's going to get twice as difficult, consume twice as much energy to acquire Bitcoin, and that is the cost of it. It's called a proof of work network, meaning you get a coin when you can prove that you've done the work, which actually uses electricity and has a real cost associated with it. So the halving happens, I think it's in April. That's the first one. The second one is the Bitcoin ETF. So ETF stands for Exchange Traded Fund, and why this is important is because a lot of superannuation funds or big money managers cannot buy Bitcoin because it is not in their mandate or charter to buy unlisted securities or investments of that kind. When it becomes an exchange traded fund, which is managed by the likes of Fidelity or BlackRock or any of these big money managers like in Australia, an AMP or something like that, it means that these money managers of these super funds and big end of town retirement funds of the police officers in America, for example, the people responsible for those funds can go and buy into an ETF, which is direct exposure to the price of Bitcoin. So it's going to be an on-ramp for an enormous amount of capital that's been sitting on the sidelines that would look at, for example, the last 12 months ago, well, Bitcoin is the best performing asset in the last 12 months over the S&P, over real estate. It's up 150% this year. Now, we're not saying that those those big money managers are going to allocate 20 or 30% of their fund, that they might allocate 0.5% of the billions of dollars they manage. This is collectively billions and billions of dollars that will be looking to acquire some exposure to the asset if the ETF is approved. So that's another huge, big a milestone. And the other one this year is that the SEC, which is the equivalent of ASIC, I suppose, in Australia, the SEC, the Security Exchange Commission in the US, has been really proactive this year in cleaning out the major private, uncontrollable sort of players in the crypto space, aka Sam Bankman-Fried, who was head of FTX, who was a fraud, and of course CZ, who was the head of
Binance.
Sorry?
Binance.
Of course, yeah. So Binance, so that he got fined tens of millions of dollars and has been put to the sideline. So now all the ducks are sort of aligned that, these cowboys have been sort of checked, and everybody's sort of tipping that regulation is about to come into the space, which is actually a good thing in order for big money to sort of come and play in the space. So, are we looking at, let's go to you first, Mark, are we looking at the start of a bull run? Just to put it in perspective, Greg, just throw up on the screen there. This is why I really want to have this discussion, because for the inexperienced out there, it's very easy to jump onto YouTube and look at headlines like these ones here, must buy before 2024, biggest bull market in history, the biggest crypto bull run, all these kinds of screaming headlines that these YouTubers use to make you feel like you're about to miss the best thing since sliced bread, otherwise called pumping. And I think we've all been victim to pumping in the past. But is it going to live up? Sorry, James.
Eric's still on OnlyFans.
It's still in OnlyFans.
Eric's still with OnlyFans.
Okay, we're talking about crypto now, boys. These pumping schemes and scams. So, Mark, what are your thoughts? Is crypto going to come back strong in 2024, or is this a case of sell the news and get out now?
Yeah, I've got a few thoughts on this. First of all, in relation to the altcoins, I think we've all been there. I've lost 7 figures on altcoins in the last cycle, and I think that's part of everyone's rite of passage when understanding financial markets, to have that big loss.
What is an altcoin?
An altcoin is a coin that is not Bitcoin, so an alternative coin to Bitcoin. But I think I've said this in the past, I think Bitcoin largely is a forward-looking macro indicator. So when Bitcoin's rising, people are voting that the economic picture is going to start to look a little bit better. And when Bitcoin is going down, I think they're voting that the economic picture is going to start to look a little bit worse. So I'm trying not to get involved in the stories of the altcoins this time round, because I think we'll talk about this, a lot of the altcoins have been a bit of a grift. They don't really have a use case in the real world. They're just narratives, right? Whereas, some could argue that Bitcoin is part of that narrative as well, but I do think that there's some compelling things that show its correlation with the business cycle. Maybe Greg can throw up the article on the Bitcoin ETF war. So Bitwise just put out an ad, and I think you're going to start to see these big money managers start to promote the ability to buy Bitcoin, and that's going to be net very bullish for the space. I think when the gold ETFs were first announced, the price of gold 10x'd. So I'm not saying that Bitcoin.
I didn't know that.
I'm not saying that.
Can you repeat that?
The price of gold actually 10x'd when the gold ETFs were first announced.
And over what time, Mark? Do you know?
I'll have to go back and have a look at it. But it basically increased. Gold went from like a
whatever it was,
100 billion to 1 trillion or whatever asset over that period of time. But again, I think that it's going to run into the cycle. So if the cycle does start to turn down, we need to be a little bit careful. Something else that's really interesting, and we might be able to throw it up on the screen, is the non-zero addresses of Bitcoin continue to keep rising. So even in the downward cycles, people are still starting to adopt more and more Bitcoin.
So you mean wallets that are people who've got a digital wallet? For those of you who aren't familiar with this terminology, a digital wallet is an online wallet, right? Or a cold storage wallet. But the number of addresses or places that people store Bitcoin, the amount of zero balance is the lowest it's ever been. There's more wallets with Bitcoin in it than ever before.
Exactly. More and more people are opening a crypto wallet that allows them to hold Bitcoin. And that number has just steadily been increasing. So, that would be pretty positive for Bitcoin as well. So I think we might, but it's also worth exercising some caution because, the price of Bitcoin has gone up over 100% year to date.
Any other comments?
I did a little bit of research in regards to the halving of Bitcoin. So in 2012 was the first and second halvings, and initially one Bitcoin cost $12 at that time. Yeah. And then it surged to 1,200, which was an increase of about 10,000%. And then you fast forward to 2016, which was the third halving, and Bitcoin was around 650. And then after the event, soared to $19,000 per Bitcoin, which was a 2,900% increase. And then the last halving, which was in 2020. So it's every 4 years, the halving. The most recent one in 2020 was an increase of 750% from 9,000, and it surged to 70,000. Obviously, we're not at 70,000 anymore, but
you're talking US dollars here.
we're talking US dollars. But as you can see, 2012, 2016, 2020, then going to 24, where's it going to go now? So
there's been a lot of work done on that. And so basically what happens is as the asset has matured, the amount of growth. So statistically, if you look at the data, from the day of the halving, it is historically been the start of a bull run, which peaks 18 months more or less after the halving event occurs. And over the years, as the asset becomes less risky and the ups and downs are smoothing out, the upside between the halving and the all-time high are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. If you look at, if you do all the math and you account for the diminishing returns, and you were just to project forward, the best estimate's about 150,000 per coin if history repeats itself, taking into account the diminishing returns on a percentage basis. So from March, April, 18 months from now, if it was to repeat, it would peak at around that 140, 150 US a coin. And today, as we're talking, it's at about 41. So that's where we are at the moment, just looking at it that way.
Have you heard the school of thought that halving cycle also aligns with the US political cycle?
I haven't, no.
And the debt refinancing cycle. So a lot of the debt that the central banks issue that refinances every 3 to 5 years, which aligns with a US political cycle. So I think the school of thought is that just before an election, the person in power, obviously, or the party in power, wants to stay in power, and so they start opening the spigots of financial liquidity.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting, which sort of highlights why people do want to own an asset like Bitcoin, or what they call a hard asset, that's outside of that cycle.
Exactly.
For sure. James?
Yeah, just talking about crypto and has had its time in the sun, especially with some of the altcoins, like Bitcoin's, correct if I'm wrong, that a store of wealth. It doesn't really have a utility. It doesn't do a great deal. It doesn't have any income, and it's as it originally was planned to do, was to be able to transact. Well, no one's using it for a transaction purpose at any great scale. But talking about altcoins. And most of them are a grift. Tore up a fair bit of money on myself. But if you look at with the advent of AI, and then look at some of these crypto, this is the thing: the difference between is it a cryptocurrency or is it actually a security? Do they perform a service? What's the underlying utility behind them? If you look at the number one, second best, if not the number one altcoin in 2023, it's Render. The Render token, it's done 1,000% this year. Bitcoin's done 150, Ether's done 400, and it actually serves a real case in the for a decentralized platform for CPU cloud rendering solutions. And that this project was pre-Metaverse, so you wouldn't have even known about it. But and then obviously you got AI. 6 years ago, when I had a look at it, AI wasn't even a thing. The Metaverse wasn't a thing. Unfortunately, it's well positioned to offer decentralized GPU.
So in plain language, what does Render do?
It basically, for the Metaverse, it's a huge amount of GPU space is required. So any latent, if you've got a computer at home effectively and you're not using your GPU at the moment, you plug into the render network and it'll pull your power from your network and have a decentralized rendering network. So which is huge for machine learning, AI, Metaverse.
And you earn render tokens.
Correct.
If you participate and allow the latent time of your computer CPU to be used by the render network.
Correct.
And they then sell that.
100%.
So there you have an end-to-end use case where there's money coming in for a commercial service that is then attributed to the token holders of render.
Absolutely.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it was interesting what you're saying, though, about the advent of AI, because that, for me, was a real seminal moment in my journey as a crypto person. When AI came on the scene, it seemed like every single day there was another amazing use case for AI. Right, like my wife yesterday, for the first time ever, used ChatGPT, and she was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing! How long has this been going on?" I'm like, "Honey, it's been going on for a minute." And then I said, "Let me show you this," which was I use for our podcast here. We use a thing called Cast Magic, which basically we put in the YouTube clip of our podcast, and it writes 10 headlines, a LinkedIn post, an email to our database. A full description, time stamps, and everything, but it's all powered by ChatGPT. So when I saw AI come to the scene, I was like, crypto, there's how many, 20,000 tokens or something? Very, very, very few of them have any actual, they've had plenty of time to actually convert and become useful for something, but none of them have. And when Ethereum, and now I'm putting this on record, and this is the thing about a podcast, right? You go on record. But when Ethereum, because I used to own quite a bit, 7 figures worth of Ethereum, when DeFi went away, when you could sort of get a yield on your Ethereum, and when the NFT market went to the toilet, where it still is, I was like, well, what's the use case for Ethereum? How does it get used? And so then I got rid of my Ethereum because I was like, I cannot see they've had years to actually have a use case. And I held Bitcoin for a very specific reason, which I'm happy to talk about. But Mark,
well, it's like, how many of the latest AI applications that you've seen have tokens? So I think none, right? So
None.
I think the question is around the token element of these altcoins, whether the token is necessary or if it's just an under the table way to raise capital without triggering regulation, right?
It totally is, Mark. In my opinion, it is 100% a way of avoiding regulation, of going through the regulatory rigor that ASIC or that our government bodies require for retail investors to be protected from scams. And it's a way of saying, hey, we're outside. It's a token. It's not a security or a share in a company.
And I think that's the thing that we need to be careful of when we're getting, all enthralled with the latest altcoin as well, is that if people are choosing this method to raise finance rather than going the traditional route, well, maybe some of their other practices could be morally questionable as well, right? Not to cast that over everybody, but
a vast majority, in my opinion, it's private entrepreneurs raising money for a fairly nebulous use case, very few of which have seen the light of day.
Yeah.
And that's why I say to people, if you're going to invest in Solana, do you know who these people are?
Yeah.
Do you know where your money is going? And do you know where the revenue is going to come back from this thing? And the answer is always nearly no.
The whole myth about decentralized and DeFi, most of these people have sources of power within those platforms that control most of the voting rights or most of the tokens.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a myth.
And most of the people want it, decentralized. No one can have power or agency over our coin. They all loved that until they got shafted. Now they're all looking for the regulators to come in and avoid it happening again. So I agree.
And for me, I mean, the thing with Bitcoin that I particularly like, and this is not an endorsement, get your own financial advice, but the reason I held Bitcoin is because I believe that there is there is a percentage of investors out there that want to store value outside of dollars, listed securities and real estate. They want to have some money like in gold.
Yeah.
And I just think Bitcoin is a much better gold. Nobody knows how much gold there is in the world. You can't transport it. You can't transfer it. All the things you can, with Bitcoin, you can transfer it. It is exact. It is absolute. And I look at gold and I look at the value of the gold market, and I look at Bitcoin. It's only a fraction of what gold has been valued at, and I think it's a far superior solution for the modern age for that purpose. So I think that's my sort of use case, and I think as the world changes and we see massive money printing and we see all this government mistrust and destabilization, there's going to be an appetite for exposure to not a major exposure, but some exposure, and even some exposure for corporate balance sheets, major money managers is going to dramatically increase price if we're correct on the thesis because of the monetary policy of Bitcoin.
I think it can be pretty clear at this point, based on 2008 and then COVID 2020, that the amount of money printing by central banks is going up and up and up. And what that basically leads to is currency debasement. So your dollar that used to buy a loaf of bread now only buys half a loaf of bread. So effectively, by earning an income, you're getting poorer, right? And so you have to own assets, right? Like you see in Australia that the prices of properties keep rising as we print more and more money. So I think it's clear at this point that there's a direct correlation between asset prices rising and the amount of money that goes into the system. For me, the reason why I allocated a percentage of my net wealth or liquid net wealth to Bitcoin, so I think it was about 8% at the time when I bought it, is because I think of all the hard assets that are going to rise in this environment based on this backdrop, Bitcoin is probably going to be the fastest horse because it's so accessible, because you can buy a dollar's worth. It's easier to buy than property. It's easier to buy than holding gold. So because of the technology behind Bitcoin and its accessibility, transferability, ability to port to different countries and whatnot, I think it'll be the fastest horse in that backdrop.
I just think people need to adjust their expectations. Everyone knows a friend of a friend that made tens of millions of dollars off Bitcoin, because they owned it when it was $12 and went up to 12,000 as an example, right? And I think a lot of uneducated people that are getting into the market, like you said, there's more wallets than there ever has been. And I think there's going to be a lot of ma's and pa's in there going, hey, let's invest in some Bitcoin without really doing the research and just jumping on the bandwagon. I still think there's definitely growth in Bitcoin. I'm still investing in Bitcoin, but I don't think it's going to be one of those ones where, you invest $100,000 in Bitcoin and it's going to turn into $10 million. Can you invest $100,000 into Bitcoin and it can turn into 300? Yeah, maybe, but it's not going to be these overnight successes of, some of these altcoins as an example that are, 12 cents or 3 cents. Then all of a sudden they go to, $5. Yeah, you can make a shit ton of money doing that, The reason why I invest in Bitcoin is because the scarcity around Bitcoin. There's only 21 million that are ever going to be produced. And to me, it's just like waterfront land on the beach. You can't make any more of it. And what's going to happen is more, the lack of supply and the increase on demand puts pressure on the price and prices go up. So I think you got to realize who you are in the big scheme of things. Are you the person that's jumping on the bandwagon because cousin Billy bought it? Mm-hmm. Or are you a Mark, as an example, that is well researched in this topic and investing in coins that someone like me haven't even heard of,
Michael Saylor puts it best. Those of you who don't know who Michael Saylor is, he's one of the largest Bitcoin holders in the world. He has a company called MicroStrategy. Just until recently, he was the longest serving CEO of a public company in the United States. And he allocated MicroStrategy's balance sheet and profits to Bitcoin. I think they hold about $4 billion worth of Bitcoin today. But he says, if you're interested in investing in this space, do 1,000 hours of research. Don't do 5 minutes of discussion half cut at a barbecue and go and buy a coin, right? That's a surefire recipe to a failure, because a big part of this asset class is being able to hold through the volatility. Volatility is such a big part of this particular asset class. And a great place to do that research is hope.com, which is owned by Michael Saylor. And there's a lot of really good cerebral research on Bitcoin in particular. And then my advice is if you're going to invest in an altcoin, I understand you're either speculating or you're treating it like a startup company where you would want to get to know the founders, the use case, the business plan and all of that, because in my mind they are all, outside of Bitcoin, they are all tech startups.
Yeah.
And should be approached as such. And tech startups are a phenomenal way to lose money. For every Amazon or Facebook, there's many thousands of companies that failed along with everybody's money. A good comparison, though, of Bitcoin, and you talking about the diminishing returns over time, I think Bitcoin, I don't think it is still the highest performing asset over most time frames, beyond a couple of years. Over 4 years, it's pretty much the best performing asset any 4 years in the world. Sorry, just lost my train of thought. The volatility. So you've got to be able to hold it through those volatile times, and holding is such a key part of it in emotional management.
I think strategy is such an important part in any type of investing as well. And a lot of people kind of hear that their cousin or brother or friend or brother-in-law has made money on Bitcoin and they just dive into it without doing the proper learning around investing strategy. And I think that's really part of the important thing, because it's like a lot of the big names that are buying Bitcoin buy it when it's going down, and they've trained that ability within themselves over many years to buy when the market's going down rather than doing the opposite. Yeah,
good. What I was going to say there before to that point was, Amazon, if you put $10,000 into Amazon's IPO when they went public, by 2020, that $10,000 would be $21 million. But only two people held that long, and that was Jeff Bezos and his wife at the time, Mackenzie. And there were drawdowns. I think there was 8 drawdowns of over 70%, where the stock price dropped by more than 70%, and 3 where it dropped by 90% in that time. So it's not dissimilar to a tech startup in that way. It's still a relatively young asset. I think it's 12 or 14 years old, something now. So interesting times. Is there anything else you want to add, guys, before we change gears into the last piece for today, which is this story which we wanted to cover, especially as we head into the Christmas break. This was in the Australian Financial Review, an article by Ewan Black. Nearly half of Australians are chronically sick. Almost 7 million Australians suffer from a long-term mental health condition, according to research that shows the prevalence of chronic health conditions has reached the highest level since records began. Based on responses from about 13,100 households, the National Health Survey by the Australian Bureau of Statistics found the share of Australians suffering from chronic mental or behavioural condition increased from 20.1% in 2017-18 to 26.1% last year. And this this is obviously super alarming. Mental health is, I think I wonder sometimes whether it's a case of better reporting and recording these days, but I definitely think there is a case for that, where, back in the day, a lot of this stuff was going on, but we didn't have a label for it and we didn't know how to report it. But I also believe that at the same time, there are factors such as social media and lack of connection with each other, because we're all on OnlyFans instead of actually at a bar hitting on a woman, or a woman hitting on you, like with the old-fashioned way, is causing loneliness and disconnection and all of that stuff. But I'd love to get your feedback on this, because I think the downstream effects of this are pretty dire. We have people choosing not to continue into next year, which is very sad. What are your thoughts when you hear this?
Yeah, I agree with what you just said about social media, and I don't ever, I'm always very cautious to blame social media and OnlyFans and things like that, but I think the trend towards isolation is definitely increasing. I was reading an interesting article about, people in Cambodia don't actually have a word for depression. They've got a word, and I'm not going to try and pronounce it, but it literally means the water in my heart has fallen. So it is obvious that anxiety and depression, they're universal human emotions. I think my opinion on it is that we've started to lose the remedy, and for me the remedy is tribe. being surrounded with your family and friends, being surrounded by the people that love you to kind of pull you through those hard moments when the water in your heart has fallen, right? I think we're becoming a little bit detached from that, and I think that could be why the numbers are starting to increase.
Yeah, this is, it's a thing now. You can Google it. It's called the loneliness epidemic, where 1 in 4 adult Americans, it's what the study's been based on, suffer from loneliness. And it's some alarming stats there that, poor social connection, 29% increase of heart disease, 32% increase of stroke, 50% increase of developing dementia for older people, and more than 60% suffer from a premature death. I mean, and with the advent of social media, the COVID pandemic, it's a mixture for not a great outcome.
Yeah, it's partly why I do my poker nights, which are becoming quite famous here on the Gold Coast, is because, and why the guys who come to those nights always want to come back, and we have a waiting list now of people trying to come and play a game of poker, because it's just an opportunity to get the boys together and shoot the shit and be men, not toxic men like what you see here getting up to no good, but just boys being boys, having a laugh, giving each other shit. It's really so many guys. What's been interesting is the wives and the girlfriends talk to my wife, because my wife is very instrumental in organising it all, and say, oh my God, I love it when my husband or boyfriend comes over to your place, because he always comes home so charged and so positive. There's no topless waitresses and cocaine in the bedroom sort of stuff that the Gold Coast is kind of famous for. It's just good, Eric.
That's why I didn't go to the last one.
But yeah, I mean, there's such a need for that, and I think if you're listening to this, it is really, as you're here now, think about somebody you can invite over for a barbie or over for a beer. When was the last time you got invited to somebody's house for dinner these days?
Yeah.
Like, really think about that. Back in the day, that happened a lot. And people don't do a good job of that. Like, we've invited lots of people over to our place and very few invitations come back. And so it's a lost social skill that is very sad to lose. But I think, you just got to sort of be the party starter if you can be, and then you won't be lonely. And Eric?
I think with anxiety and depression, you can't physically see it.
Yeah.
You're sitting there talking to someone that looks perfectly normal, and them telling you, I'm depressed, or I'm anxious, I can't leave the house, and it's hard to see at times. It's this intangible thing. When you got a broken leg, you see the broken leg. When you had your shoulder surgery a few weeks ago, you can see the pain that you're in, and it's very hard to see that pain. And I think it's always been so taboo in the past. Like they say now, it ain't weak to speak, but I think a lot of people still believe it is weak to speak. And that's the unfortunate part to all this, especially males. I think females are a lot better than this, than
Have
males.
any of you guys suffered from anxiety or depression, or both?
Anxiety for
Yeah,
sure.
both.
Anxiety?
Yeah.
Both, for sure.
Both?
Yeah.
You've had struggles with depression as well?
Yeah, and I think to Eric's point about not being able to see it, I think sometimes the last person to see it is the person themselves as well. I think sometimes you don't realise that you're having trouble sleeping because you're feeling a little bit anxious or depressed. I think there's a lot more people that are starting to get educated about their own feelings as well. So yeah, I think noticing it in yourself, I think, is one of also the most important things, because it creeps up. It might start as just frustration or a couple of wake-ups in the middle of the night, and then life events occur and it really triggers and builds. And that's been my experiences. And it's like, oh, where did that come from? But then when you kind of go back and do the learnings and piece it all together, you realise that it was building over a period of time and you probably didn't recognise it. And then it turns into something that's a little bit more, should I say, stereotypical definition of anxiety and depression. Because I think it's important to remember that anxiety and depression is healthy. It's in small dose. Look, depression's not healthy, but anxiety is a response that the body is creating to keep you safe. So in small doses, that stress can be positive. But when we lose touch with how to deal with it or lose touch with our tribes and isolate, I think that's when it can really start to get out of control.
What did you do to get through it? Like, do you have any anything that worked for you to deal with anxiety or depression?
Yeah, I mean, I think meditation has been great. Morning breath work and having a routine for me is really important. I think a lot of the cause of my anxiety was being in a responsive state. So when you're running a business, you're being an entrepreneur, there's always things that are getting thrown at you. And if you're being reactive to those things, they can kind of take control of you. And so starting my morning with a morning routine, my breath work, my training, I'm being proactive in choosing how to start the day. And so when things come at me, I feel like I can see them a little bit more clearly. So
James, what about you? Any?
Yeah, shit tons of alcohol and Valium. No. Straight to the club.
Was that the triggering it or was that the healing it?
Yeah, probably both. No, but yeah, exactly. Exercise is just getting up and getting active. And the minute you start moving, it's funny how the focus changes. Getting outside and to the gym and diet.
Yeah.
I think diet's huge.
Diet's huge, eh?
Diet's huge, yeah. So
get off the alcohol as well.
Totally.
Alcohol is absolutely a depressant on its own. Don't give it any more.
But it gives you massive anxiety as well. Alcohol just absolutely thumps your heart, so it's no good for you.
Diet's one of the last things that people will look at. But there's a really good book on the role of diet and anxiety and depression being related to other metabolic disorders like diabetes and things like that. It's called Brain Energy by Chris Palmer. Awesome book. But diet is super important, and a lot of people have intolerances as well that are actually affecting the gut, and the gut is linked with the brain, and it's all kind of linked.
Because I think exercise as well naturally leads to improved sleep. So if you cut out, improved diet and exercise, they all sort of work together. Like if you're having too much sugar, too much caffeine, not enough exercise, that's just like a nuclear combination for bad sleep, which then compounds to you wanting more of that bad stuff to compensate for what you're doing. Eric, have you ever suffered with it? Or
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, anxiety.
Anxiety. How did it manifest for you?
Just as a late teenager, really, I think. But mine's more situational anxiety. So mine's not anxiety from, day-to-day stresses of work and entrepreneurship. To be honest with you, I think that actually helps me in a way. Mine's more situational. So for instance, if I'm stuck in traffic and it's pissing down rain and I can't get out, I start to panic, I start to go like, so for me, it's about control. So I'm a fairly controlling person. I like to be in control at all times. Hence, I don't drink alcohol. I don't do drugs. I don't smoke. I don't do any of that stuff for many, many, many years, because I sense that, I'm not in control. When you're intoxicated, someone's not in control. And it's funny because I talk to friends or family, and they say that's why I actually drink, because I actually forget about everything else, and it kind of relaxes me. Whereas it doesn't relax me, but it's being okay with saying it, and it's being okay with communicating it. The big thing that helps me is communication. My wife's very supportive, and I know that a lot of people don't have partners that are supportive, and if that's not the case, then you got to find someone that you can entrust, whether that's a good friend, whether it's a social worker or a psychologist. A lot of people see these things as taboo, but if you have no one to go to and you're in your head, you need to get it out. So for me, yes, exercise, yes, food, yes, avoiding alcohol, but at the same time, communication for me is number one. I always say it to my kids, I say it to my wife, I say it to my business partners. Communication is everything. Don't hold back, and I think what happens is we don't speak up enough.
What about you, Adam? You've had your dalliance with anxiety over the period.
Yes, serious anxiety. It hit me for the first time in Los Angeles, and it was prolonged. What you talked about, Mark, prolonged demands on my attention, because I was running 3 businesses. I was in a foreign country. I didn't have my network of mates. And I thought I was fine. I thought I was fine until I felt like I was having a heart attack out of the blue one day. And then the ambulance came because we were going to get a coffee underneath my animation company on Hollywood Boulevard. and I thought I was having a heart attack. And my mouth went dry, my heart rate spiked, and I said, call an ambulance, and I was lying down on the garage floor. And then the fireys came in the truck, took me to the hospital, and I got diagnosed with acute anxiety. And it persisted for months and months afterwards. And unlike you, it would come out of the clear blue sky. I remember when I got back to Australia, I was walking down the beach thinking, okay, I'm doing my exercise. Beautiful Gold Coast morning, 7 a.m. And I would look up and see my apartment building down the beach, and it would be 500 meters away. And this random thought would pop in my head, what if I don't make it? What if I can't get there? And I'd have a full-blown panic attack on the beach at 7 o'clock in the morning. And your thing about not being able to see it, people are walking by with their dogs, and I am freaking out. Like, I'm thinking, this is serious. And then the next thing, the brain would go, oh, the sun's hot. Did I drink enough water before I left home? I might dehydrate. How am I going to get back to the house? And I actually had it at Ferry Road Markets here. I went down to Ferry Road Markets to get a coffee one day. I'm walking along, everything's fine, and then this illogical thought says, nobody knows I'm here. What if something happens? This is the end of me. And I went into a full panic attack, like stumbling, and went into the optometry store and said, I need help, can I lie down at the back of your... And they put me out the back where the optometry thing is and laid me on the floor and called the ambos. And it persisted until I deleveraged my life, cut out certain things, coffee and different things, and just got some counselling. But and it took months to go. And thank God I don't have it now, but I have dealt with it. But I do want to say for anybody listening, if it is you and you are having either anxiety or particularly depression, I think Eric's words of wisdom are very, very founded, because your friends and family want you here. A very dear friend of mine, I saw him in Sydney 3 years ago. We had breakfast together at Barangaroo with his wife, and then a week later I was in Perth giving a talk, got back in the taxi, and he jumped off a building, and you got to talk about it, so make sure you make it through Christmas, Be social, guys,
I think we're the most connected we've ever been with these devices. And I say it all the time, yet we're the most disconnected we've ever been, all at the same time. And my wife is on to me all the time, get off your phone, you're on your phone, and a lot of it's work-based. But at times there I am with my family, right, hanging out, and I'm in a rabbit hole. And at times I get upset. Leave me alone, don't worry about it. But because I know she's right, so we have to be careful. I remember, like Adam was saying, as a kid, tight-knit European family, the door was always open. We'd have people drop in all the time, aunts, uncles, cousins, bring food, like, house is a mess, you look like shit, no one cares. Today,
no one drops in.
Yeah. You need specific time, 6:30 on Thursday night. You can come for dinner, come for a coffee, and the house needs to be clean.
People are outraged if someone drops in these days.
Yeah. Now.
What are you, some kind of psycho?
Yeah. How dare you? I look like shit. My house isn't clean. You can't come in. And I think a lot of it has to do with these devices and social media, because you never knew what someone else's house looked like.
Yeah.
You didn't know how good they could look. Now, to me, I see it and I say it. It's a fugazi. It's this kind of fake world that we're living in. And
Vamoose. What was Andrew Tate saying? Right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, but I think what we need to do is, like Adam said, Adam's very good at organizing, and Cass is amazing. And even Jen and I, we love it, but we need to get better, because we want to bring those roots back in, especially for our kids, and know that, people can drop in. We have good friends that live 2 doors down, and their kids are the same age, and we have open door policy. They run in, they come in, they go into our fridge. Our kids go into their fridge. They're dropping in. I need to borrow this. You got sugar, and I love that. And we're actually going to start building a house this year, and we're going to move from the area that we are in. And in the back of my mind, subconsciously, I'm like, it's not going to be the same. You know, you're going to have this big, beautiful house, yes, but you're not going to have, you know, hopefully we'll have some connection with neighbors, but it's going to be hard to have the same connection we have with our neighbors now, because we're such, literally, the kids are best friends, and they're some of our best friends as well, you know. So I think we have to keep that in mind, especially during Christmas. This season, it's as happy as it is, it's very sad for a lot of people, and I think what we need to do is remember, you know, who are those people in our lives that might be, and just reach out to them, you know. And don't send them a text, you know. Give them a phone call, give them a FaceTime. You know, I loved Adam when I first met him. We created a friendship, you know. He's the only guy that would ever video call or, you know, send a video message with a happy birthday. No one has ever done that before, you know.
Cass and I always look at our circle of friends at this time of year and say, who do we know that might be on their own this Christmas? And just send them a text saying, we're thinking of you. If you're alone at Christmas, there's a seat at our table, you know. Because I don't think anyone should be alone at Christmas. It's, you know, just think about those people in your life that you love, and make sure, don't assume that they know you love them, you know, and that they matter, because don't take people for granted, you know. It's a great topic, guys, and I appreciate your honesty on it. But if you're sitting there and you're lonely this Christmas, pick up the phone, make contact with a human being, because we need each other.
And I would just say, don't wait till we're feeling lonely to pick up the phone. Let's make it a habit to pick up the phone more and talk to our mates and drop in on our mates, because the best remedy for these kind of things is to prevent it from happening.
I think back, you know, talking about OnlyFans and having, you know, some guy in Nigeria is the one that's messaging that person back, but that person thinks it's that girl. You know what? Let that person think it's that girl. Because if it's making them happy and they don't know any other way, it's probably better than not having someone to talk to be honest. You know?
Yep. Set our judgments aside. Have a little kumbaya here, guys. But guys, thank you for watching the pod. This is our last episode before the Christmas break. It has been awesome so far. We've had a lot of fun doing it. Greg, thank you again for your outstanding producing back there. Mark, James, and Eric, it looks like you want to say something, James? No, you're all good. Thank you for your attention, guys. Drop a comment below. Let us know what your thoughts are on any of the stuff we talked about today. And most of all, if you like the episode as we go into 2024, what would help us the most is if you simply like the video, subscribe, because it'll help us get some guests here next year for you to learn from, and drop a comment and tell us how it's affecting you, and share the content. That's what we love. But like and subscribe, that's the only thing. And if you do that, we will do our best to make the show better and better and better. And it's a lot of energy and time to think about what we're going to talk about, and planning and resource and so on. So we appreciate you. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great Christmas, and we'll see you on the flip side in 2024.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Hey there, I hope you enjoyed that episode of Unemployable. Here's a fun but sad fact for us. Most people who love our content are still not subscribed to the channel. Now, I totally get it. Normally, when you subscribe to something, it involves giving up your email address, and then you get bombarded with emails, people trying to sell you stuff and all of that. But in the world of YouTube, that doesn't happen. We don't get your email address and we don't bombard you. All it means is when you log into YouTube, you'll see our channel there, and you can easily click on it and check out our latest content. Now, here's the deal that I will make with you. If you can find it in your heart to click on the little subscribe button below, I promise you that we will get better and better guests on this show so that we can interview them for you to give you better and deeper insights from people that have really done some crazy good stuff. And I promise you that we'll be working harder than ever to make this show even better for you. So that's the deal. If you click on that little subscribe button, hit the notifications bell as well, we would be deeply grateful, and we'll make a better show for you going forward. If you'd like to watch another episode, just click there.